All right, my friends, this is 27.3. We just heard about 27.1 and 27.2, how the United States won World War II. They came home, the economy was very strong, and how most Americans were getting back to work, getting jobs. But we have to start thinking about this big question of what to do with all of those war-torn countries. We talked about the United Nations, but there's going to be another conflict that arises during this time, and it's known as the Cold War. So it says, even though the U.S. and the Soviet Union had been allies during the final days of World War II, a struggle between the two countries began soon after the war. Since World War I, communists had taken control of the government of the Soviet Union, and these leaders will promote the spread of communism to other countries. So on our first real slide here, it's talking about the Cold War, and we're seeing some propaganda in the bottom right, and it says America under communism, and we see that people look like they're struggling and that there's fire, and it looks very dangerous and hurtful. So the United States was afraid that the Soviets wanted world domination and that they were trying to spread communism all over the world. And I mean, we really just got done with this war where Hitler was trying to do something similar with fascism. And so Americans are on edge, and they're worried about the Soviets trying to spread their ideals all over. And part of the reason why we see this happening and we're worried about it is because the Soviet Union is pushing back against the United Nations. And the United Nations was formed to keep peace. So here's the Soviet Union saying no to peace and saying they want to spread their ideas of communism all over the world. So this will become known as the Cold War. Throughout this time, the weapons, I'm putting that in air quotes, you can't see me, but I'm doing it, is economics and politics. There's not going to be any fighting at all, no direct fighting involved between the United States and the Soviet Union. And I want you to think about why. Why aren't we going to go fight against the Soviets? And why aren't they going to come fight against us? Because of the atomic bomb. We know that we all have it, or these two countries at least have it, the United States and the Soviets. And so if we enter into a conflict with them, there's a very real fear that we're going to see nuclear warfare break out. So nations will remain armed just in case, but the weapons during this time will be basically the economy and politics. Per the Yalta Agreement, which was made in World War II, the Soviets were supposed to be holding free elections. They were supposed to be getting rid of communism, but Joseph Stalin isn't going to listen to that at all. And you guys watched a video about Joseph Stalin and saw that he was a really poor leader, and that he was a dangerous man, and that he caused a lot of harm to the people in the Soviet Union. And so he wants communism to spread. That's really his goal, even though he promised to have free elections. But the United States does not want it to spread because it's a threat to democracy, which is the kind of government that we have. And so we're worried about something that will become known as the domino theory. So if you've ever played dominoes, think about you line up all the little dominoes or little pieces in a row, and once you knock one over, then they're all going to fall to communism. And that's what the United States was really worried about. And so we start to look at those smaller countries in Europe, and we're thinking, do they need our help? How can we help these countries after World War II? Winston Churchill had been the leader of Great Britain during World War II. The United States, we were close to Great Britain. They're one of our allies. And so he gives a very famous speech where he says, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. He does not mean an actual curtain, nor is it made out of iron, but it's a very real divide. So even though we can't see it, we can feel it, and we know where that divide is. That divide is between the countries that are communist and non-communist. And so he uses that word iron because Joseph Stalin, he has proclaimed himself to be the man of steel. And so he is spreading his virtues all over Europe, and Winston Churchill says, hey, we need help. We see that communist dictators are controlling Europe, and they're being supported by the Soviet Union, and America is getting challenged by Winston Churchill to step in. But again, my friends, think about this. We can't come in too hard, because if we do, we're looking at nuclear warfare, which is not something that we want at all. We just got done with World War II. The Cold War is going to divide Europe and Asia. We will look at some maps in class when I return, and we're going to look at what happens with Germany specifically. But that map there, that flag and image that you see there is the communist symbol. And so it will be coming to be known as the Red Scare, and red is one of the colors that really embodies communism. So how is the United States going to handle this? We know we don't want there to be nuclear warfare. And so we're going to come up with a plan called the containment policy. I want you to think about a water bottle. You put water in there and you put the lid on it and it is contained. The water stays there. It's contained. And if you shake that water bottle up, it doesn't go anywhere. The water stays in the bottle because you've got it contained. But what happens if you take the lid off and then you shake the water bottle? Well, my goodness, you're going to have a big watery mess everywhere, right? And so think about a container. We can keep the water contained if we keep the lid on it. But if we take that lid off, it will spread and go everywhere. That's what the United States was saying about communism. And so we don't want it to spread like water. We want to keep it where it's at. We're smart enough to know we can't outlaw it forever. We cannot go against Russia and say, we're dropping nukes, you got to get rid of communism, because that's not going to go well. We don't want there to be nuclear warfare. So instead we say, just keep it contained. Keep it where it's at. Let's not allow it to spread to the United States, and let's not allow it to spread to any of the other smaller countries in Europe that need help. So this will be our foreign policy on communism. We don't want to see it spread any further. All right. President Truman is going to come up with something called the Truman Doctrine. And this is still related to containing communism. But we see Greece and Turkey are struggling after World War II. Their economy is hurting. Both of them had been impacted during World War II. Greece is in the middle of a civil war. And the Soviets wanted to take over part of Turkey. And so both of these countries, being weak, are looking for help. And as they look for help, they're looking around, and here comes the Soviet Union saying, hey, we would give you this help if you want to become communists like us. Because Joseph Stalin knows that if he can take over more land, that means more power for him. And the United States is watching from afar, very nervous about this, because it seems a little Hitler-esque. Why are they taking over this land? Why are they using a certain type of government to kind of bully these countries into being part of them? So President Truman comes up with a plan that he calls the Truman Doctrine. He asks Congress for $400 million, and he says it must be the policy of the United States to support free people who are resisting outside pressures. If we falter in our leadership, we may endanger the peace of the world. He says it's America's job, because remember, America can't stay out of anything now because we're a superpower. It's America's job to help these smaller countries after World War II. We cannot allow all of these countries to become communist. And so we cannot falter, we cannot mess up here, because we need the peace of the world to stick around. We don't want there to be nuclear warfare. And so the doctrine is essentially a plan to provide economic or money and military support to any country that says no to communism. So we went to Greece and we went to Turkey and we said, we'll give you money. We will help you to say no to communism. And it worked. This is the first test of the containment policy, and it's going to work. Another plan that comes about during this time is the Marshall Plan. Secretary of State George C. Marshall knew that the United States needed to continue helping Europe with this rebuild, and that they have to help these smaller countries say no to communism. And so this is a 4-year plan. It's multi-billion dollars. And again, it's going to help those smaller countries to say no to communism. It's going to give them money and give them supplies to put into their own economy, that then they might also have money to buy supplies from the United States. So it's kind of a win-win for the U.S. We're keeping countries away from communism, but we're also going to be helping our own economy by giving them this money. The Soviets hate this plan. They hate this plan. And so one thing that we're going to talk about when I return is that Germany had been split into 4 pieces. After World War II, they split Germany into 4 pieces. And I'm going to get you a map when I return next class. We're going to look at a map together. But they're going to split it up, and there's going to be a free side and a communist side. Now, within the communist side, there is a very important city in Germany. And that city is Berlin. It's the capital. And so a discussion was had that said it doesn't seem fair that the capital should be on the communist side, that Russia's in charge of, the Soviet Union is in charge of. So let's split that city right down the middle. Half can be free and half can be communist. They're actually going to build the Berlin Wall right down the middle of that city. And so we see that the leader of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, is angry at the United States for helping all these other countries. And so they're going to do something called a blockade. They're going to stop giving supplies to people in Berlin who are on the communist side because they're very angry at the United States. And so the Soviets, they don't like that the free side of Berlin is doing better and that the free side has combined. So they're going to cut off all trade and supplies to the communist side. Okay, so here's a map, and we'll get one when I come back too, but I want to show you this map. It's very, very important that these 3, where my cursor is, the green, blue, and yellow, will all combine. And the red part is the communist part. So you can see that it's still being portrayed with that color red. And then within this red part is the city of Berlin. And you see that there's blue, green, and yellow, just like the rest of Germany. Those are all the free parts. And the red part is the part of Berlin that has the communist. All right, so then that red side, like I was saying, I'm so sorry I had to pause. I'm back, though. The red side of this city is the communist side. So they're going to build the Berlin Wall right down the middle, and they're going to cut off supplies to the red part of that city. So there's going to be a blockade and an airlift that takes place. And so in 1948, 3 days after the blockade had occurred, President Truman is going to order an airlift of all of those supplies to be taken into Berlin. And finally, the Soviets will kind of let go of their negativity here, and they're going to open up again that there can be trade and supplies dropped off to Berlin, and Berlin then can remain a free and democratic city. NATO is going to be developed around this time. So we also have the United Nations that we talked about, but now NATO is going to be a little bit different. NATO is called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. After that Berlin blockade, the United States and 10 other nations got together and said, hey, we have to be prepared in case the Soviet Union tries something like that again, where they're cutting off supplies to people. We can't have human beings suffering. And so this treaty says that an attack on one member in NATO would equal an attack on all of them. And so all of the non-communist countries are going to form together. Dwight D. Eisenhower, he was the mastermind for D-Day, is going to be elected the first leader of NATO. And he says America will volunteer 350,000 troops if there's an attack on a NATO country. Of course, the Soviet Union hears this, and they're like, well, we want to have something like that too. So they're going to create what's known as the Warsaw Pact, and they're going to combine all of the countries that they had taken over through communism. So countries like Czechoslovakia, Albania, Hungary, Poland, Romania. And this was signed in 1955 in Poland, and it's a military treaty. And again, it says if there's an attack on one of the communist countries, all the other communist countries will come to their aid. All right, my friends, we are going to stop here with this section of notes, and then you do have a reading assignment to do and the review questions. And then from there, we're going to do this last section of 27.4 notes.